Hi, everybody. I'm just getting going here. Could you please just give me, by the way, Campbell Venning here from the Property Factory. Welcome and to tonight's presentation. But I'm just having a little bit of a problem with well, not problem. I just can't quite see if people, one, can hear me, and two, if they can message me. So could somebody please put a comment in the Q&As, just like, I can hear you, Cam, or, oh yeah, here we go. Somebody's saying something, which means I think you can hear me. Thank you, Adrian and Joseph and Hiram. That is wonderful. Okay, can someone also tell me if you can see a wonderful picture of a house in Queenstown and with the New Zealand comments on the front, New Zealand property investors. So I think you can see that too. All right, but normally at this stage of an event, I'll tell you where the toilets are and where the emergency rooms are and all that sort of carry on, but I don't need to do that. So we've got a few more people logging in, so I'll wait probably one more minute. And I have now put all of the questions on another screen. So I will answer some of those questions during the presentation, or I will hand it to David, who's also online with me. And I think he may be doing some of the webinar. He will confirm or deny that, because up until now I've done all of it. David's been doing a great job on the numbers, on the finance, on the slide side of things. So he is actually going to co-host with me. I'm your first and last speaker, presenter, and yeah, I'm going to basically answer questions as we go sometimes, but the rest of them we'll do it as a group at the end. So if you've got time at the end of this presentation, please hang around, because that's when we will answer pointed questions. So without further ado, if I can get my slides going, there we go. So quick agenda. I'm going to talk to you about who we are and what we do. I'm going to give you a bit of a property market update. I'm also going to talk to you about property investment portfolio strategies. That sounds all wordy and complicated, but the reality is it's very simple. And if you follow the simple rules, you will win. And when I say win, you will retire off rental income when you decide to pack up your day job. That's as simple as it gets. Timing and property is key, and I can't press that enough. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on that. I'm going to talk through some case studies of actual deals. We're not an education company. We're not a theoretical company. We are not a university course. We are the real deal. We do what we say. We practice what we preach. We are in the market all the time. I'm constantly negotiating on deals. I'm constantly arm wrestling with developers and vendors. Today was one of my most frustrating days because I was having brain damage from two valuers, but that's another story. And that was on behalf of our customers, because I think the valuation industry needs to become a hell of a lot more formulaic, because it is literally a lolly scramble. We'll talk about that later. The factory pipeline, I'll talk about what's in our pipeline in terms of deals coming to you. And I'm also going to talk about next steps. We've got about 80 people on this presentation tonight. And in that, we've had 80 people book. There are still a few coming in on at the moment. And basically, we are a business that can help existing investors, wannabe investors, and my favorite, the first-time buyers. First-time buyers, I spend the first 10 minutes with them convincing them that they're not first-time buyers, they're first-time investors, but more on that later. So who am I? I am a property guy. And what that means is that I've been in property for a long time. I hit that horrible age of 50 this year, and it's exciting and depressing all at the same time. It's exciting because the kids get to leave the nest and leave me and my wife in peace at some point. And we've got the first one of those leaving at in December, next month. It's nearly next month. So that beautiful young looking fellow on the, I know you're thinking the right, but on the left of your screen, he is leaving to go to Victoria next year. And those other two beautiful girls, or three beautiful girls, as my wife and two daughters, at some stage they'll leave the nest. And the one thing property allows is to give you the choice to hang around with your wife at home, go skiing with your wife, keeping on working, do what you want. Now, unfortunately, if you're in a JOB, which is a job, that sometimes doesn't allow you to do that, and it certainly doesn't provide an income in retirement. And that's what property is all about. It's about income and retirement. So who am I and what have I done? Well, first of all, I bought my first property a very long time ago. And for 10 years, I did nothing but renovate. Well, my wife and I, and that's that beautiful woman in the middle between the two good-looking men at the back. We were serial renovators for 10 years. This was before Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This is before Martin Hawes. This is before any of the property companies in New Zealand who teach you how to renovate or flip. We just did it, and we got into it in the early 20s, our early 20s. And for 10 years, we bought the worst house in the best street in Wellington, and we won. We did very well, enabled us to take a year and a half off. We packed up about $450,000 worth of income and jobs, being my wife's combined income with mine, and we lived off rent for a year and a half. So property enabled us to have that first year with our firstborn, and it was pretty cool. Since then, it was a long time ago. Let's fast forward things a bit because my story is a bit boring and not everyone wants to hear it. But I've pretty much done everything in the world of property, from renovating to trading to investing to developing. I spent 3 years as an investment lender, and that, David, we need to put that in bold, because investment lending changed my life from helping other people, really accelerating my property investing. And that investment lending happened in my first 10 years. So that's not in chronological order. And one of the things that we will do at the Property Factory, and I can almost guarantee this, if you become one of our customers, we will help you understand the financial side, the money side, the banking side, the rent over cost side, the return on capital, the LVR, the DSR, all of these boring, horrible acronyms and names that sound like you should just let the bankers do that, the brokers do that. But when you get it and understand it, you will drive and fly the plane. And it wasn't until I really understood investment lending that the penny dropped. Right now, we've got 3 real estate agencies. I'm also a property trader and a property investor. And I try and be a good dad and husband as well. I also have a hell of a lot of fun with what I do. That is a ex-playing All Black who's got a filthy Australian in a headlock. It was just after we'd beaten them. And that Australian's a mate of mine. And that's Charlie Faumuina. So and I love my rugby. That's the Bledisloe Cup, the actual Bledisloe Cup in my lounge. And that's me heli skiing in the Mount Cook region. So property's given me some amazing experiences and provided us with an amazing life. And it's not rocket science. Here's the other thing. Property is a really, really simple business. And if you want to join our business for free or pay a little fee to sort of accelerate your progress with us, you will win. Because we are, in my opinion, a unique business. I don't know any other company like what we do in New Zealand. I've sourced and sold over 2,100 properties over the last 24 years. We've probably eclipsed the $1 billion mark. We haven't changed these slides for a few months. And I guess our wider team, when I say wider team, I'm talking national people on the ground, our national partners, our national experts, our national financiers, our national advisors, our national lawyers, are all property experts. And the one thing I'll say about any course or program or service that you subscribe to, be very poignant with your questions. Ask the people, have they invested? Are they investors? Are they walking the talk? Because in the world of property education, there's no rules. And I've owned 2 real estate educational businesses before, and it's a bit of a grey area. And I'm I guess, as a seasoned property person, very keen to help put some regulation around that, because on the agency side of things, we're very regulated. And I think it's wonderful because it keeps people honest. Anyway, that's about me. So we are what I call a wholesale listing agency. And when I show you what we do with vendors and developers, that'll give you a good understanding of how we operate.
Campbell, sorry to jump in, but you're sharing the wrong screen. And so everybody can see the presentation mode and the whole menu, not just the full screen. So you need to fix your view, because there's also messages from your daughter popping up there for us all to read. So just letting you know.
Hang on, why is that happening? Sorry, guys.
You just stop your sharing and then choose your other screen, not your monitor, because you've probably got two screens going. Sorry, folks, but it's just I saw feedback from a couple of you on this, so I thought I'd just jump in and put Campbell out of his pain. Yeah, it's the wrong screen. That's sharing presentation mode.
What are you? Sorry, what can't you see at the moment?
We can see your screen plus the little slide that's coming next, plus your menu, plus your play button, plus your. So just choose, when you choose to share, make sure you choose.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's taking the wrong screen, so either unplug your monitor and that'll probably fix it. That's it. You fixed it.
Sorry, guys. Right, so that's the property factory, and that's what we do. I mean, whilst I might not be able to drive PowerPoint properly, I do know how to drive a property deal, whether I'm buying or selling or advising. And I guess that's the nuts and bolts of actually what we do from a business point of view. You know, we decided after a lot of money spent and a lot of research not to become an education company. Because property education is extremely self-regulated. And I don't like that. I love the fact that the real estate industry is regulated, and I love the fact that the financial advice is regulated. But very, very few companies, in my short knowledge, there's only one or two in New Zealand who comply under both. And we take that side of things very seriously from when we're dealing with customers' point of view. So I'll just make sure this is clicking on the right slide. So is that happening, David? Can you now see just one screen that says 21st Century Investing?
Yes, that's great.
Cool. So let's jump into the topic. We are all about property. We are a property company, and that's why I called it the Property Factory. I called it the Property Factory because I see us as a factory of product to first-time buyers and investors. Whether you're a first-time investor, second-time investor, or a sophisticated investor. I've got a client that I'm taking to look at 2 projects on Friday, and they're capable of buying 30 properties. And they probably won't buy 30 properties, but they're capable of it. So the 21st century investing is very different to what it was when I started. It's very easy to buy a property, but if you buy the wrong property, it's very hard to get out of it. And one of the things that we do very well, in my opinion, is help people get into the right property. So let's start with New Zealand. We're actually a very young country, and we've got a very young property market. In 1982, 80 or 82% of us owned our own home. And what that means is that the market for property investing, or the business of being a landlord, was very small. The government was the main landlord of the country, Housing New Zealand. So private landlords were rare. Now, as inflation hit the country, as people the country started growing in population, all of a sudden affordability became an issue and not everyone could buy their own house. So in those days, in the 60s and 70s, everyone bought those bungalows off Housing New Zealand or the government. Everybody bought not everybody, 82% of us bought their first home, an old villa, and they thought they'd renovate it. 2019, the cost of renovating is very different to what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. And in some suburbs and locations, it's not economical to renovate. Secondly, there's a worldwide focus away from from larger houses to smaller houses. And if we go to the Northern Hemisphere, which is typically where trends start and they follow south, people are downsizing to townhouses and apartments. People want lock and leave. They don't want 4 acres or 2 acres or even 1 acre of lawns to mow all the time. There's also a government change in New Zealand, and I think it'll continue with National if they get in. I think that the healthy tenant, healthy economy focus for the government around housing, because it's a growing market in the sense of investment property or tenanted properties. They're forcing landlords to be a hell of a lot more compliant on healthy home standards with insulation, with ventilation, with double glazing, with heating, all through. And it's only going to get worse, in my opinion. Renovating, when I did that 10 years with my wife, we would renovate on average 2.5 properties a year, and we did it for 10 years. And every dollar we spent, we typically got about 3 back in value. And when I say value, I'm talking value on renovation, not market value. So if we spent 50, we get 150. If we spent 20, we'd get 60. If we spent 100, we get 300 back. And nowadays, I've surveyed a lot of landlords, and I get them to be honest with me, and I get them to value their time. And the current average is about every dollar landlords spend on renovating their rentals, they're getting about 80 cents back. So to the point that some properties are actually more valuable as land. So the landlord or the builder and / developer in that situation are buying lovely old villas and they're bowling them and building multiple townhouses or apartments subject to location. So renovating is getting harder to the point it's not economical, and a lot of what I call retail property investors and retail owner occupiers haven't worked out yet that for every dollar they're spending, they might not get it back at the other end if they choose to sell. Because people in New Zealand, probably worse than what I've seen in Canada, America, and Australia and other Commonwealth countries, and America, because America sees everything, Kiwis are emotionally attached to housing. Kiwi dream to own your own home. But what we've forgotten as a nation is that housing has a limited lifespan. And to the point that we've got a suburb in Christchurch where older is more expensive than newer, which is just insane in my world. So 21st century investing, it makes us challenge all of our old assumptions, all of our old norms, all of our, guess what we grew up with? And migrants and I guess younger investors, they don't have that tainted view. They don't have those emotional behaviors. And I'm seeing some really, really smart young investors coming into the market. I'm seeing some smart young builders coming into the market. So times are changing, people, and you need to keep up with those changes. So let's just go back to the property factory and what the hell we do. We are a sourcing business. We source great deals for our customers. If I compare us to Ray White or Bailey's or Harcourts or Barfoot's or Tommy's or Lowe & Co in Wellington, if you're watching from Wellington, we are nothing like those businesses. Those are what I call retail real estate agencies. They list whatever they can and they hope like hell that someone buys those properties. Now, that's a bit brutal, but some of those companies I've got very dear friends in, but that is literally a real estate model in New Zealand because the agents are paid by the vendors to get as much as they can for their properties, and the agent doesn't get paid until the property sells. It's real estate 101. Now, in America, if you watch $1 Million Listing, it's quite wonderful because you see somebody representing the seller and you see someone representing the buyer. And all of a sudden, you've got two sharks going at each other versus one shark and an innocent little dolphin. Because most buyers of property are doing it every 7 years. So that's their big day in the sun of pretending they're Donald Trump, negotiating their first or second or third purchase. And they think that they know what thing or two. They've watched the negotiating shows. They've watched $1 Million Listing. They turn up thinking, yeah, I do a pretty good job cutting deals. I'm going to negotiate. What they forget is they're dealing with a seasoned agent who has been negotiating 5, 6, 7, 8 times a week. And that's their job. So you're never going to win. Whereas on $1 Million Listing or America, you have a buyer's agent and a selling agent. And in my world, that's equitable. So we are on the side of the buyer, but we're not paid by the buyer. Because New Zealand's so small, the country doesn't justify a buyer's agency system. And I'm keen to see that change. But at the moment, we are paid by the developer, by the vendor, by the seller. But we turn up with a very different story to the real estate agent that's groveling and kissing the backside of that vendor developer for a listing. We don't do that at all. I sit down and say, how much money have you got on this project? How much experience have you got? What are your track record? How big is your balance sheet? Are you using MES funding or bank funding? And they look at me initially and think that I've got something wrong with me. But then I show them some of the deals that we've done and some of the volume of properties that we've moved, and they go, I might listen to this guy. Because most real estate agents in New Zealand don't know how to sell off the plan. So we are mainly off the plan project sales, unless it's brand new and finished and unsold, like we've got right now at this moment. We've got one in Christchurch, which is complete. People can buy it today, they can rent it today, and they've got a brand new property and they'll still get an 80% loan. So we start with the buyer. What do buyers want? What do buyers need? Often our buyers don't actually know what they want. So we help them identify that. So we have bulk discounted stock. We have early stage prime land subdivision product. We have, we get in early on a complex in when it's being packaged up and help design the project with the developer. We'll look at converting a property from a long-term home into short-term accommodation. We get involved in early stage house and land in new growth locations or new here, like we've been involved in Wanaka and Queenstown with special housing area projects, in Bridesdale next to Lake Hayes Estate, and North Lake on the peninsula in Wanaka. So we get involved in lots of property deals, but we look at it from, does this work from the investor? Does this work from a rental point of view? Because every single developer and vendor I've met always convinces me what they spend a good half hour trying to convince me that their product is better than everyone else's, and they're the greatest developer in Christchurch or Wellington or Auckland. I just roll my eyes and I go, blah, blah, blah. Let me have a look at your stock and I'll let you know if we've got buyers for it. And the arrogance of people in this world, and what I do, when developers have been having a golden run like they have in the last few years in Auckland, in Queenstown, in Hamilton, they get really arrogant. And they think that agents should be polishing their backsides and groveling for a listing and halving their fees and paying all the marketing. And I rock up saying, well, that's what, a list and hope agent will do, and they might move one or two. But if you want 10 or 20 or 30 properties sold in a short space of time, you actually need to listen to our business model, because it's very different to the list and hope at Harcourts and Ray White and Bailey's, because that's not what we do. We have a pool of very qualified, very seasoned, very finance approved buyers. And if you want access to them, these are our rules. So I sit down with developers, and I don't say it that blatantly and flippantly. I admire their wonderful product and how good a deal they've done, and I acknowledge that. And if they haven't done a good job, I also point it out. I'll tell them. I say, well, you're a Jetstar product. We're used to Emirates business class in this location, but if your price is right, we'll package it as such. So I'm brutally honest. And when I'm talking to a developer, these are the things that I'm first, and before we even talk to, in fact, we don't talk to the developer first. We look at the product, we look at the location, we look at the future for the location, we'll look at the historical area's performance and forecast. And then when we tick all those boxes, and we've got about 15 to 20 different boxes that we tick or cross. And if we don't hit 80%, we move on to the next project. And it was a bit embarrassing, because I had David found a new project in Christchurch, organised a developer to come in and meet us. And I looked at the project online. I looked at it compared to its neighbours, and it just didn't stack for us. And I didn't get a chance to tell David before the meeting. And I brutally had to tell this chap that we couldn't help him. And he was convinced that I would have been kicking his doors down to get his project, and he was excited about us selling his project for no marketing spend and no advertising spend. And he was I wouldn't say he was disillusioned. I gave him a reality check of his project next to the competition and said, you probably should just stick tenants in that and keep it, because it was finished. But what he wanted to sell it for and what the market would pay for it were different things. And he'd been through 3 real estate agents, yet he was still of the view that, oh yeah, we're going to solve all of his problems for him. But that's not how we do it. We are there to get the best deal for our clients, and they are the people who we answer to first. So yeah, we're not your typical real estate agency. We look at it from, does it make sense? Is the location right? Who's the target buyer? Who's the target tenant? Where is it market timing? And then we put our experience and judgment on it. And sometimes you might get 80%, but there's something that's niggling you. There's something that's nagging you don't like. You might ring around and ask about the funder or the developer's credibility or credentials if you don't know them. And that's when an alarm bell might go off, and all of a sudden an 80% deal turns into a 0% deal. So we're pretty fussy with what we take on. And yeah, locations are key, infrastructure is key, but the developer's DNA, their history is also key. So to get all that right, I'd probably look at 20 deals to get one. So from my perspective, I'm as fussy as you can get. So poor old David thought he had found a great deal, but and to be fair on him, he didn't have time to do the homework. And I did enough homework to work out pretty quickly that it just wasn't our deal. So I said earlier, we sell off the plan. Now we've actually got a project right now that's finished. It's technically off the plan from a banking point of view. It's off the plan because it's not occupied. It does not have owners in it or tenants. It's a brand new finished complex with 60 plus units in it. And we've got an exclusive listing in there. And it's one of the best we've seen. So we'll talk about that one later. So when you buy off the plan, in the mid 2000s, early 2004 to 5 to 6, buying off the plan was so common, and the legal rules around buying off the plan were very different to what they are today. We saw a whole lot of developers taking people's 10% deposit, claiming the GST on the land and the costs to date, and then buggering off to Australia or some other foreign land. New Zealand government and the legal fraternity changed the rules. So if you buy off the plan now, your money is held in a trust account, and that stakeholder has a legal obligation to hold your money until you get a title and a 224C, which is a certificate of acceptability by council that your property is finished. So you're paying for something now, and you're only paying 10% on average, but you don't have to pay the rest of it until it's finished. The developer, on the other hand, is taking a huge risk on cost increases and inflation, price variations on materials. There's so many things that they are taking risk on. And the only issue you've got is that your money, your deposit, is tied up in a trust account for longer than you'd like. And when projects stall or fall over, this is the biggest risk you have. But your money's safe, and it's typically earning interest. Not all the time, but typically. So we do all that homework. Now, we can't see everything. We can't see into the future. And we go in with best intentions, and we do as much homework as we can, far more than a typical investor would do. And we have some people who just ride the market, buying off the plan, selling before completion. So buying off the plan, if you're a second-hand investor, if you're an investor with 5 rentals that you bought 300 years ago, this will go against your grain, because you typically like to see it and smell it and kick the tires and knock the walls. But typically now, if you knock the walls, the house might fall over, because so much of New Zealand's housing stock, in my opinion, should be bulldozed or burnt. It is just, as a centre-left political voter, we have a housing problem, not just because we've got a shortage, but we have a housing stock which is just so run down because landlords have not been reinvesting in that housing stock. And I think they should be ashamed of themselves. You know, we have a health system that the taxpayers pay for. And if we're not keeping our tenants warm and safe and healthy, then we actually we pay for it anyway. But Kiwi landlords are tight. They don't like reinvesting in the properties. And the ultimate penalty there is we lost depreciation. It was a tax deductible non-cash expense that the government gave to us so that we'd maintain our properties. And we didn't, so they took it off us. So older landlords in New Zealand who don't maintain their properties should be ashamed of themselves. And, you know, if you go into some lower decile locations from a housing stock perspective, you see a raft of social problems, overpopulation. You see terrible insulation. You see just a horrible situation from a social perspective for the country. And a lot of that problem is landlords loath to fix, repair, or maintain the properties. So I'm all for this government or any government forcing landlords to maintain their properties better. And, you know, a lot of the right-wing landlords who sort of our costs down and revenues up and you know, building a great big portfolio. They don't really care about the social construct of their customer being the tenant. I think they should be penalised. So now I'm jumping back to some deals that, hang on, let's have a quick look at the questions, and I'll let David, if you see any questions that you think we should answer, can you, otherwise I'll get off track.
Yeah.
So I'm just now going to, the numbers I'm going to show you are a little bit dangerous and exciting all at the same time. Well, I've been doing what I've been doing for 8 years now. All of these examples, I guess, are some of our track record. These are real deals. These are ones that I've done. They're not all the ones I've done. There's some of the ones I've done. But I know all the tricks of the trade when it comes to negotiating and beating up builders, developers, vendors for the best deal I can. So these are some townhouses in Christchurch. The developer was quite young. They were new to the market. Well, not new, but they hadn't been around for 20 years. They've been around for about 18 months, maybe a year. And I got in early with them, and I said, right, you've got this nice little project here. Give me a price for all 4. And they go, oh, okay. And they were selling these for 390 grand each. And I said, give me a price for all 4. And they went away, and they came back and said 360. And I thought, well, that was a pretty quick drop. 30 grand times 4 is 120K. And I said, no. And I walked away. They rang me again, and they said 350. I said, wow, there's another 10 grand. There's 40 grand. Anyway, I ended up getting those for 320 grand each. That's a $70,000 margin off valuation, and they hadn't built them. Here's the great thing. This was off the plan. So I got 70 grand per unit times 4. That's 280 grand. We basically negotiated on that deal, and I had a business partner on that deal, and we decided that we didn't want to keep them, so we sold those before the builder had finished them, and they didn't have a problem with that. That was in their contract, so whether we could do that, so we on-sold them, and so I think our net on that project was about 200, just under 200 grand across the 4. So I'm not trying to tell everyone to become instant property traders, but that's effectively what we did. Let's look at a more slower deal in Wanaka, which is I've been very busy in Wanaka. I think I'm up to about 38 houses down there now. But when we got into Wanaka, I was the developer's biggest sole purchaser at that point. So in Queenstown, I basically bought and I'll show you this in a minute, but I bought 13 sections in Queenstown as the last purchaser. They were the last 13. I got a discount, but not much of one because they were the last ones, but I still got a discount. But when we came to Northlake, I was the first purchaser, and I got 10 sections at a reduced price. And we put houses on land that cost us just over 200 grand. The houses cost just under 300. And when those houses were complete 2.7 years later, the houses didn't take 2.7 years to build. The land took 2.7 years to build, because when we bought these sections off the plan, it was a paddock with rabbits and grass in it. So we bought land off the plan to then build houses off the plan to then on-sell to investors or owner-occupiers. So again, very healthy return, but it was spread over nearly 3 years. And we did a lot of research on that because our risk at the time was pretty high. I mean, we took a $2 million position on the land and a $3 million position on the builds. And as you can see with that, our return was pretty healthy. And if you get your calculator out, you can work that out to the dollar. So we did our first 10, then we did another 6, then we did another 8, and then we did another 4, and then we did another 10. So we did a number through that subdivision, which is still growing. I was there this week catching up with my builder, having a look at some of our clients that are building, having a look at some of our clients that are selling, having a look at our client stock that's being rented. And we've got another 4 houses that our builder's about to start, and I've got another 6 with we'll get the land next year. So we're going to be in Wanaka for some time. Queenstown, same developer, same product, different time. Still, we made a very healthy return over the course of just under 3 years. Again, even though we got in last, the development hadn't started. in terms of the land hadn't been started, being built, turned into sections. So it took the same amount of time. Another one in Wellington, this was a long time ago. We were buying apartments for $350 and selling them to clients. So a lot of our clients did trade in this. They flipped, they bought and sold, some bought and kept. I haven't actually seen an apartment in this building in Wellington being on sold for some time. They're very tightly held now. One-off deal in Queenstown where we bought a property for just over $500,000. We were going to spend $100,000 on it. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom. We were going to convert it from a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom to a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom. It's going to cost $100,000, and the market went horribly right. And my wife had done all the homework. She'd spent all the money on consents and lining up contractors. And I said, I'm really excited to tell you and sad to tell you, you might be doing that renovation because guess what? We're going to sell it as it is without doing anything to it for a hell of a lot more than we paid for it. And she was a bit annoyed and grumpy. But when I showed her the math, and she said, yes, that makes sense. We took it to auction. There were 18 bids on this property. And I was expecting to sell this. I paid $505 for it. We spent maybe $8,000 giving it a quick coat of paint and a bit of a fresh up. Let's say 10. So let's say it owed me $515. We sold that property for $785,000, 14 months after we bought it. Now, I can't say that that was my wife's $10,000 that did that. The market was flat when we bought it, and it was extremely hot when we sold it. That's the ultimate market timing. So if you want to see more of these deals, we have a whole heap of them on our website. Please feel free to look at them. They're all real. None of them are made up. And yeah, they are, that's some of our track record. And I guess we're a national business. We've been doing what we've been doing for a long time. So hopefully that gives you comfort that we are actually we are the real deal. So I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of the New Zealand property market. But before I do that, David, why don't we just get a few questions?
Okay, Campbell. Specific question there around sunset clauses and what factors we put in place to ensure that those clauses don't work against the buyer. And then a second question about developers who cancel contracts and resell at higher prices later, where the investor misses out on the opportunity. So you want to just talk about those? Yeah,
good questions. So first one, sunset clauses. First of all, let's explain what a sunset clause is. So when you sign up to something off the plan, and if it's a turnkey, which is a saying in the market, basically you sign an unconditional agreement, you will pay 10% deposit, and a year or 2 years later, the builder, developer, vendor will give you a new property. The sunset clause is a clause in the contract to protect you from that builder sitting on your 10% for 5 or 10 years. Now, if it's a high-rise apartment building in Auckland, the build will take up to 2 years. We are not a fast construction country. In Australia, they build about half the space at half the time we do. In Asia, they build 3 times quicker than we do. So we are very slow because we're a small country. We don't have that many resources. We've only got so many cranes. We've only got so many workers. We have to import labour to build a lot of complexes. So a sunset clause is in there, and your bank, it's the first thing they look at. And if the sunset clause is for 5 years, your bank will refuse lending because that's too long. So typically a sunset clause is double the construction estimate. So if the builder is building a townhouse and it's a 9-month build, the sunset clause should be 18 months, maybe 20 months. If it's a 1-year build, it should be 2 years. It's typically double how long they expect to take. And that's for unforeseen delays, a global financial crisis, a credit crunch, a supply shortage in steel or something. It's just giving the builder an insurance policy for unforeseen events. So that's what a sunset clause is. And you have us looking at that and questioning whether the sunset clause is too long or too short. Sometimes we tell the builder it's too short. So, it's there it's a sensibility test that we always look at. So the second clause was, and I bet this came from Auckland, because I haven't seen this in Christchurch or Wellington ever. But the second question was relating to what happens if the developer cancels the contracts and resells it at a higher price. And this is where the sunset clause can actually go against you as the purchaser. And it's horrible to watch. And I think in New Zealand, the reason that we don't see much of it, but we have seen it in Auckland, the reason that we don't see much of it is that the developers would be named and shamed. It's very common in Australia in a hot market with, let's call them startup developers. But basically what they do then is delay the project themselves so they can invoke the sunset clause, because what's happened, the market has moved up so quickly around them that they've decided that they've undersold it. Now, some developers will genuinely undersell a project by mistake. I've been involved in those projects as agent. One in Christchurch, where the developer got their costings wrong. We sold it. The bank said, no, the margin's not strong enough for the developer. And we had to go back to purchasers and give them an option to cancel their contracts or have the price increased by 5% or 10% or whatever the difference was. And in that instance, the builder developer has stuffed up their pricing, or they've been hit with unforeseen costs. So that's a legitimate contract cancel situation. But where a market has jumped up dramatically and a builder has delayed the construction to purposely be able to cancel contracts, that's a whole different kettle of fish. And that's a name and shaming experience that we would happily do to a developer builder, because we would have done a whole lot of work. Clients have taken a whole lot of risk on and faith in the project. And the builder said, well, thanks for giving us our pre-sales. We've got funding now to build it, but we're going to cancel your contracts and resell it. So it doesn't happen very often. And I hope it hasn't happened to anyone on this webinar. If it has, I'm sorry. There are always bad eggs in the nest. We try and avoid them as much as possible, and touch wood, that hasn't happened to us. We've had unforeseen delays, but we haven't had intent and developers doing that with intent. So good questions. Anything else, David, for me to answer?
That's all so far.
Easy audience. Just one other thing, hang on. I'm just going to get one other thing here. Okay, so what I do for the last 6 months, we've been doing events around the country, and we have been face-to-facing people like you, and some of you may have been to one of our events, and please let us know if you have, and we love the feedback. But David and I are pretty proud because we've had great feedback. We've had people that have said, man, we've been looking for a company like you for a long time. You're honest, you're frank, you practice what you preach, you don't just teach it, you do it. That's great. We trust you. We want to work with you. And what I also have been doing at these events is giving customers a real market overview of what's going on in the New Zealand property market right now. So I'm going to do that very quickly by giving you probably the last 6 months. This is New Zealand for the last 6 months. Immigration's still strong. 70,000 is now high. We haven't had 70,000 people hit the country. The government have put the brakes on immigration, or actually they've started to pull the brakes on. So they've slowed it down. So at our peak, we were growing at 70,000 people per annum. That's now down in the 40s, but it's still growing. Or sorry, we're growing as a country. Our interest rates are low, and there's a big consensus out there right now that the next OCR review, the official cash rate review, is going to see another 1/4, if not 0.5% drop, which from a property investor's world is wonderful. You've just been given a pay rise. From a retiree who's living off interest, that is a pay cut. So it's a really solid economical debate. The poor old people who are living off their savings and interest, they've just been given a pay cut. So pensioners and people who are reliant on money in the bank to live, that's tough. property investors just got an increase in their return. So, you know, it's a bit of a dichotomy depending on which side of the fence you live on. We are proponents of property investors, and from that point of view, it's great. So interest rates dropping and continuing to drop is very good for property investing. LVR restrictions. I talked about LVR and all sorts of other three-letter acronyms before. LVR stands for loan to value ratio. The government is so solid on getting more housing in New Zealand, more new builds, more off the plan, that they've said to people buying investment property, to investors, if you want to buy an old property, you have to put more equity in than if you want to buy a new property. So not only is it my opinion that you should get rid of all your second-hand properties, and we can help you with that, it's the government's opinion. So LVRs, loan-to-value ratios, favour new property, meaning that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand will allow you to borrow less money, put less money in and borrow more on new property than they will on old. We've still got a shortage of 50,000 dwellings since this Labor government came into power, and there's been no atom splitting there. So we've got this problem for a while. And I guess the big regions are at different stages, and this is where it can get risky now. 2 years ago was a safer time to invest than it is now. And this is one of the things that I think we do very well, and I think we help you with to ensure that you buy at the right time of what I call a property cycle. And I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that in a second when we get to what I call a property clock. So regions at different stages of the property cycle. Government are continually forcing overheads on existing investors, and there is a demand. We're already seeing it in the retail market, and we're seeing it with our customers that they are shifting to new. And I think we're going to see that for 10 years. Now, here's one for the future. In the world of property, in New Zealand, you can go and buy one rental, you can have 10, you can have 100. There's no real rules around it. But if I look at places like Hong Kong, the institutions have moved in to the investment market, and they're making it really hard for mum and dad investor or first home buyer or first home investor to get in. And I grew up in Hong Kong as an expat brat. My father was a judge up there. I did most of my secondary schooling up there. And it gave me a very international perspective on life. But in Hong Kong now, apartment towers are built by institutional money, being a publicly listed company or a big fund or a conglomerate that has access to capital. They'll build apartment complexes in very good locations, and they won't sell them. They rent them out. Because with growing rental markets means a stable income and stable supply of customers. You know, back in the 80s, we only had 20% or 18% of people renting. You could have empty properties for a long time. And, you know, I see the future of our property market. I see the property for industry. I see the commercial syndicates. I see Infratel. I see Naitahu building and keeping. I think they're going to start building housing and they're not going to sell it. Investors won't be able to get in. And that's my prediction. And I think people who, with property investing, let's go right back to one thing I missed at the start. What is property about? It's not about gloating to your neighbours or your mates at work that I've got 40 properties. I'm a serious investor. It's actually about buying enough rentals to live off the rent in retirement. That's what property investing is about. And the trouble with most people, if I showed you the statistics of the number of people who own more than one property, it's actually a very small number. Because most people get into property investing without having any idea. They buy properties that they like as opposed to make sense for them financially. It's a mitigated disaster. Whereas the people that have learned, they've been taught well, they've learned from doing it themselves, or they've just followed good business basics, because property is a business. But the goal is to retire off the rental income. So to do that, you need to know a few things. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things tonight that are part of that. So this is semi-educational. First of all, the country does not move at the same rate. So Auckland is much further in its property cycle than, say, Christchurch. Wellington was flat for some time, and then it had a spike. But if you look at property long term, it's very predictable. We move in cycles, which are typically 7 to 10, and each location is at a different stage of what we call a property clock. Property clock, 12 o'clock is prices are highest, 6 o'clock prices are lowest. Prices are lowest. Between 12 and 3, it's typically an oversupply, prices fall, sale volume fall. That's a declining market. A falling market is where it gets worse than oversupply, and it gets recessionary, it gets depressionary. And that's when construction stops, things wind right down. And that's what the government's concerned about at the moment. They're in dropping interest rates to stimulate the economy so that we don't have a recessionary environment. Now, we're nowhere near a recessionary environment in property, but we are in some sectors that the government's concerned about. On the other side of the equation, between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, that's when we have an undersupply. That was Wanaka when we first got into that market. There was more buyers than sellers. And we got in early, and that's what we've ridden. We rode that 6 till 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock, that's when things are really going gangbusters. That was 2006, before the global financial crisis. That was Christchurch in 2015, 16. That was Wellington in 2014, 2015. That was 2016, 2017, and even 18. So every location is at a different stage. And one of the mistakes people think is that the market is moving all at the same time, and it doesn't. Long term, yes, it does. But short term, no, it typically doesn't. So let's just look at this for the last 20 years. The blue line's Auckland. So if we look at it in a 20-year graph, not 100, it's very accentuated around 2008 in that there was a drop, and in 2013 where it started to climb quite steeply. I mean, it's been climbing since 2009. However, Auckland had accelerated growth compared to the country because most migrants want to live there. It's the biggest population centre. It is New Zealand's, it's 50% of our economy. So the orange line is the New Zealand average, which got pulled up with the Auckland growth, but then we'll look at some other locations like Hamilton, 20-year growth there. It's a lot more close to the New Zealand graph or the New Zealand line. So from a tracking perspective, Hamilton's at around the New Zealand average. Te Wata, and I put Te Wata in here. If you're from the South Island, you don't know what Te Wata is, don't feel bad. It's halfway between Hamilton and Auckland, and it's been identified as a Rolleston type location if you're a Christchurch person, or a Cromwell type location if you're a Central Otago person. It's been identified as an area that is going to grow significantly because it's perfectly halfway between Hamilton and Auckland. There'll be a fast train stop there between Hamilton and Britomart. And in rush hour, it's actually quicker to go from South Auckland to Te Wata than it is from South Auckland into the CBD of Auckland, which is just mad. So Te Wata's growth has been a little bit all over the place, but again, it still followed the New Zealand. If you look at it now and 20 years ago, same as the New Zealand national average. So you can buy a brand new house in Te Wata for 500 and something grand, whereas that same sort of house in Auckland will be 800, 900 grand. Wellington, again, very similar to New Zealand growth, but since 2017-18, we've seen it go past the New Zealand national average. Wellington's a funny one. I was in the Wellington market for, well, I'm still in the Wellington market. I own property there, but I was active in that market for 15 years. We had great growth, but the reality is if we'd done the same thing in Auckland, I'd probably be worth 3 times what I'm worth. It just so happened that we lived there. But safe city, highest income per capita based on New Zealand. CBD of Wellington has the highest income per capita as a city, as a CBD location. And it's all the film, technology, corporates. There's a lot of high income earners in Wellington. And they've had a really, really nice couple of years of growth. And we're seeing a huge number of Wellington investors and Auckland investors and Hamilton investors coming south to Christchurch for this very reason here. And that is Christchurch has had a very different trajectory since 2012. And this is where I normally go to the audience and say why, and people would go the earthquake. And well, there were actually two earthquakes, but one very major one. And since that earthquake in 2012, Christchurch has had a very, very different property market. And it's not because the city was levelled, but 80% of the CBD was destroyed or pulled down, 80%. But it took a long time to deal with that, from dealing with loss of life, destruction, dealing with what the heck, people moving out, people moving in to help rebuild. You know, we've been involved in the Christchurch market since 2013, and we've seen a lot. I believe that it's broken the back of construction. You know, the infrastructure projects are some are completed, some are well underway, some are still to come, big ones, but the core ones, like the Justice Precinct, like the library, the sports complex, which is underway, the hospital upgrades, the green frame, the river frontages. 17 infrastructure projects were signed off by the government and the Christchurch City Council and the residents, and I'm seeing those come on board now, and it's a very different place. And I think anyone in the North Island or Central Otago who aren't investing in Christchurch need to seriously look at it again, because I think every investor in the country should be in the Christchurch market. It's too cheap, in my opinion. It's hovering around that $450,000 mark. And as New Zealand's second largest city that has got rising population, it's just screaming to go up. And most experts in property who I speak to agree with me. And, you know, I think in terms of rent, I mean, you got to look at the fundamentals. What's the rent on cost? Is there a supply of tenants? And in some locations, Christchurch has had oversupply, and the brain surgeon investors that read the news for their property advice will very vocally and openly tell whoever wants to listen that, oh, it's oversupplied in Christchurch, the rents are low, and it's stuffed. It's going to take 50 years to get fixed. The people that I hear that from are completely ill-informed. They're typically not investors, and you know, they're quoting an article written by a journalist that also doesn't understand property. So, you know, we ignore all of that. We pay for research. We talk to people in the know, i.e. at council level, at building level, at statistics level, at Reserve Bank level, at research level, from quotable value, core logic to economist houses. We do our homework, and Christchurch is forecast for growth. And if people can't see it, then they need to get new glasses. So Queenstown, just jumping around the country, had massive growth since 2012, and in that period of 15 through 17, we rode that beautifully and made some great gains. Now, it's also a dangerous market. If you buy in the wrong place in Queenstown with the average house price or the median sale price over $1 million, you've got to be careful, you know what you're doing. So it's a dangerous market at the moment. There's still money to be made, but you've got to be in the right product, the right location, and with the right developer, because we're already seeing a couple of projects stall down there. My father's in on one. I've told him to get his money out. I said, this will never get built. I honestly don't believe it will. 2 years later, he's still hanging in there. He's agreed to a couple of price increases. And I've said to him, I think you're mad. Get your money out. It's a great location. It's great design. But there's a reason it hasn't been built yet. And I've said to him, my alarm bells are going off. Wanaka, similar to Queenstown, still got a wee way to go. A lot more land in Wanaka. So again, if you get it wrong there, it's a bit more dangerous. I don't think it's, you know, I was down there this week, and I think there's a lot of property on the market at the moment. So it's what I call a nervous market. You know, after being down this last week, I've changed my tune a little bit. So, you know, from a product point of view, it's got to be at the right price down there at the moment. And for me, the stuff we were selling 6, 9, 12 months ago, I'm reassessing that right now. There is product down there that I think we will get into, but it's probably not the same stuff that we've been doing for the last 10 years. Cromwell. Cromwell is an interesting town. We call, I think it started in America between Aspen Vale and Aspen Vale and Brackenridge. They called it the Golden Triangle. You know, Aspen was the Queenstown, Vale was the Wanaka, and Brackenridge was the Cromwell. And wherever you've got two boom towns, you've typically got a service centre. And the North Island Golden Triangle is Auckland, Tauranga and Hamilton. The South Island Golden Triangle is Wanaka, Queenstown, Cromwell. So Cromwell has piggybacked off the back of Wanaka and Queenstown. But as you can see, the median sale price is only 600 grand. Now, that is now above the New Zealand average because it's only 20 minutes or 25 minutes to commute from Cromwell to Wanaka and about 45 minutes from Cromwell to Queenstown. So it's pretty close to those other locations, and a lot of people are living in Cromwell and commuting to those places, but they get sick of that after a while. And I think what we're seeing now is prices starting to level off there. Safe location, population's growing, very accessible to Dunedin, to Christchurch, to Wanaka, to Queenstown. It's a service centre. It's like Rolleston has the inland port for Christchurch that ties into the port in Lyttelton, and no different to Hamilton has an inland port which serves Tauranga and Auckland as well. So Cromwell is the third leg of the Golden Triangle down south, as is Hamilton is the third leg of Auckland and Tauranga is one. So if we sum this up, what's going on in New Zealand? Auckland, you know, it's our epicentre and it's flattening off. That's much better than a big drop like we saw in 2008 after the global financial crisis. The great thing that's saving Auckland at the moment is infill housing, the Auckland Unitary Plan. A lot of those crappy, horrible old rentals that people put tenants in are getting bought and bowled, and good investors, good developers who are providing rentals for the market are putting 4 townhouses on a site that typically had one crappy old house. So from from the point of view of what's going on up there, that price leveling is good. And I'd expect that price to come back because we're selling properties now in Auckland with a 5 in front, 500 grand, 600 grand. And these are townhouses. So we're not doing much in the apartment space at the moment, but with townhouses under the Auckland Unitary Plan, I see a real shift of landlords up there into that product. And I think Christchurch, Wellington, Central Otago landlords, that's the stuff to get into, getting brand new 10-year guarantees. They're renting immediately because they're surrounded by crappy old second-hand housing. And we're at the start of that product cycle. So that's the stuff we're selling in Auckland. Boring townhouses, house and land packages in new locations, and that's what's going on in Auckland. The green line, that is Tauranga. We don't really encourage people to invest in Tauranga. It's a destination, it's a lifestyle location. The rent on cost doesn't make sense until we see land being released at a much more acceptable price. We don't recommend people invest there. Lifestyle, sure. Batch, yes, if you can afford it, but solid investment location, nah, not right now. Black line is Wellington. Hamilton, yellow line is Wellington. Black line is New Zealand. That's the black line in the middle. That's the New Zealand average. And the purple line is the Tron. The red line is Christchurch. And the blue line, we're throwing Dunedin there. And I've done that to be a bit parochial. I'm a South Islander, but I lived in the North Island for most of my life. And that orange line is Wellington, Christchurch, which to me is just so cheap to the point that Dunedin is predicting to go past Christchurch's median price, which is just insane. I mean, Dunedin, from a landlording point of view, is a one-tenant town being students, and they're volatile. They're a flight risk. They don't typically rent for 52 weeks of the year. And to think that Dunedin's rental market or property value market is catching to Christchurch is enough of a reason to scream in lights that Christchurch is too cheap And I would not invest in Dunedin either unless I was living there. I don't see it as a rental location at the moment. So to summarize that, before I go to some questions, we talk about cash flow and capital growth. A cash flow location is typically been your Tokeroas, your Rotoruas, your Invercargills, your Dunedins. They've typically been cash flow locations. Now, I'm telling people not to buy in those locations right now unless it's a new build location with a cheap product for what it is, i.e. we've got brand new housing in Te Kawata that's in the $500,000 range. And it's drivable to Auckland, it's drivable to Hamilton. So we sort of talk about a 1.5 hour location between capital cities. You know, it doesn't take 1.5 hours to go from Taupo or Rotorua or Tokeroa to Auckland. It just doesn't. It takes longer than that. So keep away from them. And a lot of the old school investors buy those crappy old secondhand horrible houses in those locations. And I say to them, why? You don't need to. You can buy brand new housing in Auckland. You can buy brand new housing in Hamilton. You can buy brand new housing in Christchurch. That's cash flow positive. It's pretty much impossible to do in Wellington at the moment. I think that'll change once the transmission gullies open and once more people are commuting from the Wairarapa. I think that will change. We're starting to see some infill housing coming in the Hutt, lower Hutt, or not lower Hutt, more upper Hutt, and a little bit of lower Hutt. So I think it will change, but right now nothing we see in Wellington really makes sense. Christchurch to us is it's just so obvious. That's the place to invest at the moment. But anywhere within that golden triangle, we have got cheaper housing, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it in places like Tauranga, but we just haven't seen it for a while. So cash flow, interest rates dropping, the cash flow increases. So, you know, pick your locations that make economical and financial sense. Don't go with somewhere because you like it and it's got a nice beach. That is not a reason to invest. So David, any questions around all of that? I saw a few lights popping up saying that we may have some questions.
Yes. So, give me a second. Do you want to talk about minimum deposit on projects? And what's the minimum deposit? And then what about if you get to settlement and you can't settle the property, what happens to your deposit and how do you avoid that happening?
Deposits are typically 10%. Every now and then we negotiate a smaller deposit on behalf of a client if they've got money coming in. If they're getting money in during the build, the banks will sometimes say no, the developers sometimes say yes. But typically in New Zealand, you've got to put 10% down. Sometimes if we've got an overseas investor, they need to put 15 to 20% in, dictated not by the developer, but the developer's bank. But if it's 500 grand to buy the house, you've got to put 50 in. If you're seeing it less than that, I'd want to have a good look at the developer, because a startup developer asking for 5% deposits when we know the bank wants at least 10, I got to think, well, what are they doing this for? And then I want to have a look that the money is going into a trust account. So that's deposit. Secondly, what happens if you buy off the plan and you can't pay for it at the other end? That is a financial question. And as an ex-lender, we do everything we can to avoid that happening for our clients, which is one of the reasons we get very involved in recommending that they talk to good bankers or brokers, not bankers, or financial advisors, because people's situation can change. And the media are very good at publicizing horror stories. Now, if someone's got 200 grand, or no, use a lower number. If someone's got 500 grand and they go and buy $5 million worth of property off the plan and put 10% down, which is 500 grand, and they can't settle those properties, not only will they lose that 500 grand, but they could be pursued to the point of bankruptcy by the developer. So when you sign a sale and purchase agreement, you need to know you can buy that when it's finished. And often we see people's circumstance change, and we work with them to either on-sell that property, negotiate with the developer a release of that property settlement, Sometimes the developer will keep some of the deposit. Depends on the circumstance. We've negotiated probably half a dozen of those in the last 15 years where circumstances have changed, someone's died, someone's had a change of financial situation, or they've been injured and they can't earn anymore. Some developers just hand them back the deposit and say, we're sorry about that tragedy or whatever it was. But the more ruthless developers will go, no thanks, I'll keep your deposit. And in New Zealand, the rules around this is that if you fail to settle on a certain date or time, you can lose your deposit. The developer then has to sell that property on the open market. And if they suffer a loss, they can pursue you for that loss. If they make a gain, they don't have to give you anything, okay, once you're out of that contract. But in that instance, all you've lost is your deposit. So we have pretty black and white rules. Our lenders can discuss those with you. Our agents can discuss that with you. We do everything we can to ensure that you do not sign up to a property that you can't perform on. And it's much harder on a 2-year build than it is on a 9-month build because, let's be honest, none of us know where we're going to be in 2 years. We think we know where we're going to be, but we don't always know where we're going to be. But good questions.
Okay, next question. With the properties that we sell through the property factory, does the rent cover the mortgage payments?
Okay, well, that's a very general question. Do the rent cover the mortgages? On some of them, no, because they're capital growth properties. Like, it's very hard to find cash flow positive property in places like Queenstown or Wanaka in Auckland. The new stuff, yes, but a lot of product in the country at the moment is cash flow positive because of interest rates dropping. But we do what the banks do. We pressure test cash flow to 7%, even though right now in this country you can get interest rates in the 3%. We double the interest rate plus a bit to see if you can afford it. So we effectively do the job of a banker before we say you should or could or we'd recommend that you buy this. So interest rates are dangerous, but the international flavour at the moment is that they're going to keep going down. And the great thing about property or interest rates in the world of property is that you can actually lock them in for 3, 4, 5 years. We used to have 10-year loans in New Zealand. I haven't seen them for a while. And it wouldn't surprise me if we start seeing them coming back. Any other questions, David?
And one last question is, subdividing existing land a good way of creating investment?
Subdividing, the cheapest property in the world is if you're buying the land at the lowest value, but it's also the riskiest because land is not an income producing asset. And developing is a lot more expensive than people think, and subdividing land is for experts. So when I see a first-time investor or first-time purchaser thinking they're going to do a land subdivision, I give them a bit of a reality check and say, leave that to developers. Land subdivision is not a simple matter. There's a lot of unforeseen and unexpected costs. And if you get it right, yes, you can win, but there's a lot of risk associated with it. But it's also very, very capital hungry. You have to put a lot of money into it. Okay, Mr. House, shall I carry on?
Carry on, sir.
Right. So we are not an education company. However, I have owned 2 educational companies before, and I sold them. I loved it, but it's a specialist field. And I believe in New Zealand that I sold out of these businesses. I had other stakeholders in both of them. I sold out because it wasn't very regulated, and it still isn't, and I struggle with that. And I employ you to all, if you look at it, because property education companies typically charge $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, sometimes $15,000 to teach you to be a good and long-term safe investor. And I guess because we've owned 2 of these businesses before, we've pretty much put a lot of that information on our website. So please spend time on our website. You can buy books. You can go to free seminars. Property investing is not rocket science. And if you treat it like a business and get the right team around you, you do not need to spend 15 grand on a course. I mean, I've seen courses up to 50,000. So you don't actually have to go out there and do that. Some of the courses are 12 months, 6 months. It's not university, people. It's actually buying a house, paying off the debt, and living off the rent. It's that simple. And most people that stuff it up overcomplicate it. So if you buy 5 houses in 5 years and you hold them for 10 to 15 years, which is on average 2 cycles, most property cycles are 7 to 10 years. So if you hold them for 2 cycles, consolidate all of your income and repay debt, you can live off rent in retirement. It's that simple. And typically the mistake people make is getting emotional about it. Only buying houses that they live in, only buying in locations that they know. I know someone, lovely guy, used to play regional tennis against me. Again, we'd play, 2 or 3 times a year. Lovely guy, and he got transferred to Taihape, which is just south of Wairuru National Park, and he bought a property at the peak of a market, and he left that location, and the property went backwards by 10 or 15%. So the poor guy and his family lost money. So emotionally, he wanted to own his own home. Timing-wise, he got a job in a location that he bought at the peak and sold at the trough. And it was such a location that you probably wouldn't get a lot of rent out of it if you were renting it, because it's such a small town. And that's why places like Tokoroa and Gore and Castle Cliff in Wanganui aren't places I'd invest, because the market for rent, the tenant, is so small. They're typically very low capital growth towns. So treat it like a business. You get your income to pay off debt and pay your bills. You get the location to make your wealth, your equity, your asset go up. And that's property 101. Any questions on that? Because if you don't get that, buy a book, read, go to a free seminar. I mean, we are not an education company, but if you buy 5 houses over 5 years, and you don't buy 1 a year, you might buy 2 in the first year, 3rd in the second year. It's not that formulaic. But if you get the right people around you, they can help you assess where the market's at, assess the sorts of property that you should buy. Because everyone in this webinar, everyone on this group meeting, has a different set of financial circumstances, and you have to buy to your situation. Everyone's at a different age. People in their 20s and 30s should take bigger risks than people in their 60s, 70s. So it's all very much, one of the things we do with our business is we match you to a property deal. So that's what we do. So any other questions? Because I am a little bit behind. I'm going to speed up a little bit, because otherwise I'm going to cut into David's area. Any other questions, David?
No, that's all for now.
Okay, so that is property investing 101. Let's go to property investing 202. And the thing with property, it is, even though you can't go to university and get a property investor's education, which I think is crazy. And my wife worked for the Retirement Commissioner on a contract many years ago, and she used to own a publishing company. So I thought, wow, she's perfect. She can go to university and create property courses to help people get into property. But she got sick of teaching and decided to have kids. So since then, she's been a full-time mother, interior designer and renovator, and she gets involved in our business. But if I look at property again as a business, let's assume we've been to Property University 101 and we understand that, we buy houses, we pay the rent into the mortgage and the rates and the expenses, and we pay it off and we get the house growth, and now we've got net cash flow, which we put back into paying off debt. So how do we then make real money in property? So real money in property is that we don't just buy any old 5 property. We don't just buy the first ones that Harcourt show us or do the best sales pitch on. We do a very calculated strategy around, we buy our cash flow positive properties first, and then we buy our capital growth properties later. And when I say capital growth properties, they're typically negative in cash flow, but they're funded by the cash flow properties, which are typically positive in cash flow. And when I say positive in cash flow, the rent exceeds the expenses. And I'm talking interest, rates, insurance, body corporate fees. I'm not talking about capital repayments or mortgage repayments. I'm talking about interest. Capital growth or market growth or economy growth will make the property go up in value. but only you can pay off the debt. So you do that from rent and your income. Now, most people who go and buy capital growth properties first, so they can gloat to their neighbours and their workmates that they've bought a house in Wanaka or Waiheke Island, and we're going to go down there and look at our nice little rental. They are typically propping that up. So if you buy enough cash flow properties, it will support the capital growth one. So this is property 202. It's not rocket science, but it's amazing how many people stuff this up. And I take people to look at relatively ugly properties that are brand new, that are cash flow positive, and they go, I wouldn't live here. I don't want to buy that. And I look at them and I go, well, that's right. You're not going to live here. You're going to own it as a landlord. You're going to put tenants in here. They're going to pay it off for you. And guess what? You're going to live off that rent when you retire. So no, you're not going to move in here, but this is your income in retirement. So that's property 202. And if you hang out with us and read our website, you'll get property 303 and 404 by just being part of our business. Any questions on that before I give you to the infamous David Howes? We got any questions there, David?
None that we can't come back to later.
Yeah, cool. Also, okay, cool. So that is I'm going to hand you to David now. Now, just before he talks, the stuff he's going to talk about is as mission critical as getting the developer right. It's as mission critical as getting the location right. And if you don't understand the numbers, you will fail in property. Now, David's going to give you a snippet of it tonight. We put you with good financial advisors or good property brokers, finance brokers, and they will help you. But David's going to give you property 303 and 404 snapshot tonight. So I'm going to hand you over to him. Have you got the mouse, David? Do you know? Can you click the slides, or do I have to hand them over to you?
I have control.
Okay,
Hey,
David's flying the plane.
Hey, yeah, and I'll try and be quick, folks, because I'm conscious that we've run a little bit over time. But it's a tough topic to compress into a short webinar. I mean, short overview. I bought my first property as a 19-year-old. I got into investing in my late 20s, and I've spent a lot of time, like Campbell, in property, and have built all sorts of property-related businesses and portfolios. And I've known Campbell for 17 years, and I've also done a lot of other crazy stuff in terms of sailing, and in terms of things like Sydney, Hobart, and solo sailing across the Tasman. And I encourage you, as you make money out of real estate, to find things you can be passionate about, whether that's your family or your sports or your passions, because the years go by quickly. So I'm going to quickly move along too. The Property Factory website's full of all sorts of resources, and it's free to access the website and all of the resources. So take advantage of that. Wholesale membership is required to access the website, but it's free to sign up. So go do it, because some of the things we're talking to you about tonight require you to be able to access a website and log in and see that. And why is that? Well, in many cases, a lot of the stock that we source development-wise is off-market stock. The developer doesn't want it on Harcourts or White or on TradeMe or realestate.co.nz. They want it cleared and sold to investors at special pricing or at early stage prices, and that allows us to do that to our members without that visible to the main market. The focus of the Property Factory is to match people with property, and that sounds like a cheesy LJ Hooker ad where you get a teddy bear as well at the end, but that's not the case. Property is very much about the numbers, and Campbell's talked about that a lot. But if you want to build a good sized portfolio, you've got to get your head around the numbers, because with property, it's all about the finance and your ability to continually access more finance for more property, but also manage it in a prudent way so you don't blow yourself up financially either. So all of the projects that we critique and present online after going through all of due diligence are broken. All the numbers are broken down into 3 groups in terms of how they appeal to first-home buyers, first-home investors, and property investors. And we do all the cash flow analysis around those 3 groups. Most of you will understand first-home buyers and property investors. First-home investors is a special category of people getting into property for the first time, who then want to look to maybe buy 2 or 3 bedroom property, rent out a couple of rooms to flatmates, help subsidise the mortgage, and then maybe within a couple of years, then move on out of that property into maybe their next investment or their actual first home, and keep and rent that property out. Because often, as first-home buyers, we can't afford to buy where we want to live. Sometimes it makes more sense to rent it and invest where it's more prudent. So the Property Factory, we have a 3-step process for helping to to match you to the stock that makes the most sense. And so the first step is join as a wholesale member. It's free. One of the things you'll see on the dashboard is an investment capacity report that you can request. We suggest you request that. We ask you 6 financial questions that you can answer in about 30 seconds. And from that, we can produce a detailed 6-page report that basically illustrates, based on your starting point right now, if you were to buy more property, what would that look like? And what's possible over the next 10 years? Is that 3, 5, 7, 9, 10 properties? And then if you were to acquire property at that rate, then based on some conservative forecasts around capital growth, what does the end result look like? And you'd be quite surprised at what happens in year 5 to year 10 if you chip away and take advantage of this thing called compounding growth. So the next step we take is, once we understand whether you're stronger on the equity or the income side, the next step we work through with you is to say, okay, if you were to buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties next, what properties best match your financial profile? Because unless you match them to your profile, then you're going to pull up short at some point finance-wise. And so if you're strong on equity, but weak on income, then focusing on higher yield, higher cash flow is going to make the most sense. If you're weak on equity and strong on income, then making sure you invest in discounted property, early stage projects, regions or suburbs that are about to go into the next phase of capital growth makes the most sense in terms of maximizing your equity growth. So we help you to match that financial position to the properties that make the most sense. Because if you don't do that, you can probably buy something next quite easily, but it's what you do after that, probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is where you'll come unstuck if you don't start off on the right foot. So once you've worked out which projects, which properties, then we'll hold your hand to make sure that you then go through the finance process properly, get pre-approved for finance, so you know up front how comfortable you are from a finance point of view, so that when settlement occurs in 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 24 months, that you've got no surprises from a settlement point of view. So I'm not going to drill into this in detail, but we do a truckload of research and analysis, and the average project that we bring to our members takes us between 60 and 100 hours to do all the DD on it, to prepare it, to research it, to package it up, to do all the analysis, and to present it to you. So when you log into the Property Factory, it's a completely different experience to a Trade Me or a Harcourts or a Ray White, because for us, it's all about the numbers, it's all about the investment. And when you drill into each project individually, then you'll see all sorts of data around suburb performance, around the investment itself, around the terminology around the size of the project, and then the numbers from a cash flow point of view to help you understand how that impacts you. One of the things that we do really well is we take the suburb that the project's in, we break it down into houses, townhouses, and apartments, and then we analyze, in this case, in this example, the townhouse data for the last 20 years. What's happened in that market? What does demand look like? What's happened in terms of price growth? And what's the size of the market in terms of annual sales volume, in terms of number of units sold, and the value of that market? Because as an investor, you want to invest in a market where you know there's demand, not only from a tenancy point of view, but if you just choose to sell down the track, you want price growth, and you want to know there's buyers there for those properties. And it sounds kind of academic, but we have developers who come to us who are developing in locations where there's no more than 20 property sales a year. Well, that's a tiny market, and as an investor, your risk is you can't sell if you have to. There's not enough demand. I can just hear you coughing there, Campbell, with your microphone. I'm going to mute that. We link mapping, we link street view, we link suburb demographic profile data, so you can see all of that on the project, and then we bring in all the architectural drawings as well. So the average project has more than 100 pages of documents you can download if you want to look at all the background information. And one of the things that we do is commission independent rental assessments and also independent valuations, so that hand on heart, does this make sense? As a member, take advantage of all the legwork we do, because it helps you to get straight to great projects, as opposed to having to do that yourself on a project by project basis. So cash flows are available, 10-year forecasts based on the historical 20-year performance of the suburb, so you can download those and print those out. And just a couple of tips on finance, I guess. Right now, the market's changed to, it's moved from 90 to 95% lending for first-home buyers, which is pretty cool on first homes. With the current lending regime, it's geared around promoting investment in new property to increase the supply of property in New Zealand. There's a shortage of about 50,000 properties right now, and that shortage is not diminishing. And so you are heavily incentivized from a lending point of view to leverage your equity into new property as opposed to second-hand property. One of the things that most investors don't know is what a DSR is or what it means. And the DSR is simply a ratio of rental income to mortgage outgoings. If you buy property, the ratio of 1.3, which in layman's terms means if you have $1,300 a month in rent coming in and you have $1,000 a month in mortgage payments going out, the bank knows that their surplus will cover rates, repairs, insurance, body corp, and vacancies, and will happily lend you money indefinitely to buy more investment property without looking at your personal income to support any shortfall. If you buy at a lower ratio than that, and there's investors that buy where the rent barely covers the mortgage, let alone all those other costs, then the bank will only lend you money if you've got enough personal surplus to be able to fund that. So the secret to building a quick portfolio that's self-supporting, that doesn't rely on your personal income to prop it up, is to work on a ratio of 1.3. So banks won't tell you this stuff. Brokers usually won't tell you either. But the key is use a good broker who understands investors. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket, and make sure that they're aligned with your strategy, because otherwise, if all they do is tip your next 3 purchases into the hands of one bank, like Westpac, then you might find that you run out of options in terms of moving forward from there. So, and again, our team can help you with specialists around the country who understand this stuff. So, a couple of quick tips. If you're short or weaker on the equity side, buy at a discount, buy at an early stage in projects, buy in markets like Christchurch, where they've just started the early stages of the upward growth of the next cycle. And if you own property in average or low growth areas, sell out of it. Why sit on it when you know that's been the long-term performance of a location? Sell out of it, move your capital into higher growth markets, and you'll speed up your rate of progress. On the servicing side, buy at DSRs of 1.3. Sounds complicated. You need a website. All of the DSRs are calculated on every single project, so you know where you stand from an entry-level point of view. The majority of our projects are 1.2 to 1.5, so at or well above self-supporting criteria from a cash flow point of view. In terms of maximizing yields, dual key or dual income properties are going to help you. Reviewing rents regularly. Don't just let your tenants sit there for 4 years without a review because they're nice people. Charge a fair rate of rent. Renting out by the room in key locations, and we can help you with that, but there are strategic locations that make sense. There are a lot of locations that don't make sense, so don't get sucked into the whole, hey, you'll make a fortune on Airbnb, because you won't always do that if it's the wrong location. Again, we can help you with that, and in most cases that's not the norm from an opportunity point of view, so be careful with that. Short-term rentals can be fantastic. Some of the projects that we have access to have dual key access, so you take a 2-bedroom example, a separate key into 1 bedroom with lounge, kitchen, dining, separate key into the other bedroom with its own ensuite, and then you can have a mixture of long-term, short-term rentals in that example, or live in one, rent one out. And again, if you've got poor performing property where the yields are low, consider selling that and putting your capital back into high performing property. So a couple of tips to help you there. Wholesale membership is free, so take advantage of that through the website. Campbell, back to you.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself because I was coughing in the background. I think I picked up another lurgy from the West Coast. I was down trying to get whitebait on the weekend. Anyway, right, so that was fast. You were quick. So one of the things which David did, he didn't gloss over, he gave you a good overview, but not all property is created equal, and not all people are created equal. And we will often debate with clients on the types of properties they should buy, and we let the math do the talking, because we use the same metrics, measures, formulas, calculations, rules that the banks use. So please, please, please go online, do that free report, and let one of our team help you show you your numbers. And I don't know anyone else in New Zealand that does that, apart from financial advisors who typically charge between $2,000 and $3,000 for a report like that. So take advantage of the amazing tools that we've created to help you become a better investor. So let's get into my next few slides, and I haven't got that many left. So, as I said at the beginning, and we're gonna do a Q&A in about 10 minutes. As I said at the beginning, I go and negotiate a number of deals around the country, and we look really hard before we accept stuff. And if anything, we're probably going to, just with what's happening in certain locations, we're probably going to reduce some of our listings. We've got a couple of new ones in the pipeline. I've got one that I'm going to talk about tonight that's new. I've got one coming up, or two coming up in Central Otago. I don't know when, but you shouldn't wait for the right deal. Every deal either works for you or it doesn't. And we can't control Father Time. And so many people that I've spoken to have kicked themselves for not buying a deal after they looked at it a year later and said, oh, I should have bought that. And I go, shoulda, woulda, coulda. You didn't. Get over it. And don't make the same mistake twice. We've got deals right now that I think are ludicrously cheap. And, you know, I'm going to show some of those to you now. We mix cash flow, capital growth. Each investment's got its own driver. Not every deal's right for you, and our partners can help you with this. I was at this property this morning with a Wellington investor. It is technically off the plan, but this property is in its last few weeks of construction. It is on Barbados Street, which is on the eastern side of Christchurch. It's within the 4 Avs, and it's about a whole 500 metres from where the new stadium is going to be built. I think it's perfect for short-term accommodation. And I don't even think I've told David this yet today, but I got the new valuation for these fresh off the press, and I'm going to read them out. Well, I'm not going to read them all out because there's quite a few in there. There's, I think, off memory, 17 left in this complex, and not all of them are suited for, oh gosh, here it is. Not all of them are suitable for investors. But we've had a valuation uplift on some of these by up to $60,000. Now, these properties range, initially they ranged from 300 up to 600. Now we've only got properties that are 400 to 600. Well, there's nothing in the sixes actually, everything's under 6. But we've got properties that have jumped in value because they're so close to completion, and the valuers have said, oh my gosh, we underestimated these. The reason that this is a great product on Latimer, it's called Latimer Central on Barbados Street, is first of all, the construction methodology is more commercial orientated than residential. It's steel frame, it's concrete floors, concrete bracing on that front wall. This is a seriously well-built complex. Piles way into the ground, more than light frame timber construction. And it's in such a good location. It's almost too good to be an investment property, but because Christchurch prices are so low, you're getting an executive accommodation or an executive apartment in a premium location at a second-hand price. So we've only got a few of these. I literally put 5 names on apartments today when the new valuation came out. If you want one of these, you have to be a member. So talk to David or one of our team online later, and they'll show you how to get it. But I took through a property investor that's been doing it for 25 years today, and he said, I definitely want to buy one of those. And that was before we knew the valuation increase. So this is a great complex. It's going to stand the test of time, and it's superior to most properties around it. So that's Christchurch. Te Atatū South, which for the non-educated in Auckland, is in West Auckland. And this is a location which has got a lot of infill housing starting to come out of the ground. So typically, you know, your old houses are 700, 800, 900 grand. These are 2-bedroom townhouses are 650, 675, and they're brand new, settling late next year. Because of a shortage of new accommodation in that location, these are still cash flow positive with today's interest rates. And that is just unheard of. And people go, wow, a new house in Auckland and it's cash flow positive. And it's because of the entry price and interest rates and the rent that people are paying for brand new property. That's something to think about. Okay, this is one of my favorites. I'm a massive fan of greenfield subdivisions. I've had so much success with them. that I would call myself a land subdivision expert, in the sense that you don't judge it just for the location, you judge it for the quality of the developer and what they do to the land. And I've seen, I shouldn't quote it, but I'm going to, Shot Over Country in Queenstown, and in my opinion, is one of the worst subdivisions I've ever seen. And its life was saved by the Ministry of Education putting a new primary school in there. But if you look at the urban planning, the urban design, the lack of covenants, the lack of building rules around what can be built in there, it gets an E-. If I jump to Bridesdale, Queenstown, or North Lake, Wanaka, they're at the other end of the spectrum. The land developer has done streetscapes with very wide frontages, with lots of parking, lots of trees. They've structured the commercial and retail amenities into the subdivision so that it flows. They've put in sports complexes. They've put in tennis courts. They've done a whole lot of things that don't typically get done in subdivisions. This is the same developer as North Lake, Wanaka, and Bridesdale, Queenstown. They're also doing stuff up in Hobsonville Point, but right now our focus is Tekawata, because it's the next Rolleston, it's the next fast-growing location in between Hamilton and South Auckland. And we're talking about brand new 3-bedroom house and land packages from 537K. And when I say house and land, you've got no common wall, you've got a standalone house, and the design of these houses has to be seen. It's got integrated cabinetry, it's got executive appliances and bathrooms with tiles. This subdivision, again, it's almost too good for investors, but they've built it for first and second home buyers. But because of its location and the rental rates and the lack of rental properties in this location, this is forecast to be cash flow positive. We had a Auckland investor go in there on the weekend, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing in terms of the quality. So the land is being built at the moment. They've got show units on site. One of our team can actually take you through show units on an appointment basis only. We have negotiated a bulk deal here. So we have actually got discount below market. So if you find these on Trade Me, they'll be more expensive than what we can sell them to you for. So we've done a bulk deal here. And again, we encourage clients to have properties spread across multiple locations and multiple property types, i.e. house and land, townhouse and apartments, once they're into their second, third or fourth rental property. So Tekawata, another cracking deal. Back to Christchurch, I think we've only got 2 of these left, maybe 3. These are townhouses, about 7 minutes from Christchurch Airport, about 6 minutes from Christchurch University, and about 15 minutes from Christchurch CBD in traffic. This is in another subdivision, which in my opinion is one of the best in the country, and that's Ngaitahu. They are the biggest land developer in Christchurch. They have built very, very, very successful subdivisions. They think about it properly. They're a really, really good company to work with as a land developer. And the reason that this property is unique, it's got a discount to valuation on all units in the complex. And it's a small complex. We only had 16 off memory. We're down to the last couple. But more importantly, it's in a suburb where the average house price is more than what we're selling these for, which is just crazy. There's $1 million house being built in the same subdivision. So you're buying at the low end of the price point for brand new stock. And again, it's cash flow positive based on forecast rents in a location where second-hand housing costs more. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So these are cracking deals. They're built by, or being built by a builder that's been in Christchurch for 40 years. And they are just, it's just a good deal. Next one is in Cromwell. I'm actually not going to talk about these deals at the moment because it looks like we have got a buyer for the whole project. So these are townhouses in Cromwell, 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. And if you're interested in these, contact one of our team and we'll keep you informed because we're just waiting for that offer to come in as a wholesale purchase for the whole 6 in the complex. So that's Gear Ave. The other one that I am going to mention is we've just got a new listing in Christchurch. We are the first company in Christchurch to get a bulk listing with Fletcher's, and the product is in the 3s to the 4s for 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom, brand new. I went through it again today with a North Island investor. One of our agents went through it last week with another investor. It's as good as we've seen in Christchurch from a high yield perspective. It's outside of the 4 Abs, but it's in Sydenham, which is a very, very solid suburb from a population perspective. It's literally 2 kilometres from the CBD of Christchurch, and it is the pricing you'll see on our website tomorrow or the next day. Platinum members will be getting access to these first. We'll probably be doing viewings twice, maybe 3 times a week. We have full access to them. So it's quite weird for us having finished product, but it's empty. It still qualifies for 80% lending. In terms of Fletcher's, if you don't know much about Fletcher's, they're New Zealand's largest builder. They typically sell direct to owner-occupiers, and it's probably my biggest professional compliment that they have asked us to take their product to our property investors. And it's a mixed-use complex. So it's got retail shops going to be put in there next to the accommodation. This quality, you're getting an Audi quality in a I guess a Honda price, and that doesn't make sense, but it's just the way Fletcher's are at the moment. You've got a lot of stock and they want it moved, so they've given us really, really attractive pricing. We've pressure tested it against what it would cost to rebuild, and we believe they're selling it under cost. Yeah, I mean, I don't get excited very often, but getting this listing with Fletcher's has really excited me and our team. When you're buying properties in the low 3s, mid 4s, when you say that to a North Islander, they go, "What? Are you for real? Is that really the price?" And then they go through them and see that it's got a higher than normal stud height. It's got 2 accesses. Most of them have car parks, bike storage. They've thought about the design. And the one thing I'll say about Fletcher's, they are building communities. That's their goal. And the one thing about New Zealand moving forward over the next 10, 20 years, communities are a mixture of owner-occupiers and tenants. And one of the things that we do is hold your hand right through to the property management, because we want to make sure you get the right tenant and you're getting the right rent. And that comes down to having the right property manager. And again, more about that when you work with us. We do not put people into slums or crappy housing estates. We make sure people are going into locations where the product's going to last the test of time, the rent's going to be constant, and the management's going to be seamless. And that's, again, part of being a savvy investor. So, David, do you want to realm off any questions for me or answer any questions for you?
That's all the questions that have come through. A couple of others that were personal questions that I answered just directly, but I think conscious of time. So that's all today. So next step is to go to the propertyfactory.direct/feedback, and within there you can join membership online, your investment capacity report, so we can help you figure out how fast you can go and what your starting point is. And also our team's got information on each of those projects that Campbell touched on. They can push out to you if you want further information on any of those. So make sure you take advantage of that. So that's all from me.
Cool. Well, I'll start on line. David, we should just start in line in case anyone else pops any other questions up.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, we're here for a long time, team. If you, if you want to form a relationship with us, we respect that. That's great. We've been inundated with clients to the point that we've cancelled events for the rest of the year, apart from one's probably for the Fletcher's product specifically in Christchurch. We've got a lot of demand for that already just with the people we've been talking to about it, so we're probably going to put an event on for that. But that's undecided. But from ask us some questions. We want a long-term relationship with clients. We don't want a one-off. From that point of view, get a free report from us. You'll see what we do. become a free member. If you're a serious investor, become a paid member. It's not much, is it, David? It's $500 or $1,000.
Yeah,
it's
pretty simple to join up. There's more information online on that as well, and some of the extra benefits that go with Platinum membership. Couple more questions that come through, Campbell. You might want to have a look at those.
I've got one here. Someone said they bought in Preston 4 years ago and it hasn't moved an inch. Unfortunately, that's been Christchurch. But as I said earlier, that no matter where you bought in Christchurch, it's probably had the same story. But it has been rebuilt. 80% of the CBD was destroyed. There was a lot of housing built out in the suburbs, and the population wasn't growing. But every time I see a new complex being occupied in the CBD or a new road getting completed, the gentleman was asking about Preston's, and that's a Ngāi Tahu subdivision, very well built to the east of Christchurch, the northeast, and there's a road called the Cranford Street Extension being completed, and when that finishes, I think that's going to have a big impact on the eastern suburbs. No one's had a lot of capital growth in Christchurch for many years, but that's a symptom of the rebuild. So my advice would be to hold on to it for a bit longer, because Ngāi Tahu are also releasing new sections. So, that's been designated as a very large location in terms of population. So typically with something like that being 4 years old, it's still relatively new. Without seeing it and knowing it, our advice would be typically to hold on to it as opposed to sell it now, or you may regret selling it now. What else have we got? Are we able to recommend a mortgage broker in Wellington? So we are partners with the Money Box, but we will introduce, so that's a big mortgage broking firm in Wellington. We will introduce you to one of the owners. So Minnie, get in touch with one of our team and we will give you a direct invite, because typically we don't just recommend people to the right advisors. We help you make the decision that, are you right for investing? And Money Box is one of our advisors. We've got, one of our brokers that we use in Wellington. We've got another one. Do we have projects in Hamilton now? We did, and they've all sold. So Hamilton's quite tight to get projects at the moment that make sense. So I've got a couple of developers I'm talking to in Hamilton that have got stock. I'm just going through a bit of a DD. So right now, no, apart from Tekawata. Are we going to get more? Yes. I'm just doing a bit of homework on a couple of developers. A good question. Okay, David, you've been answering the other ones already. So I'll hang on here for another 5 minutes. There's only, we've got some more questions coming. I know. David, is there anything else we haven't answered?
Just one that's popped up there on commercial.
So Kate said commercial is slow to take off in Christchurch. There's housing growth, but growth is slow in the economy generally in Christchurch. And that's very true. There's a lot of commercial and retail space empty. And that's the law of economics, supply demand. Supply typically gets triggered from demand, but no one regulates it. No one says, right, we've got enough retail shops, we've got enough commercial office space. But the Christchurch population is growing, and a lot of the companies that went out into the suburbs haven't finished their leases. They can't leave their places yet. So I'm seeing a lot of what Kate's seeing in the new commercial, new retail space. And unless you're an investor who's building that stuff, or a landlord that's building that stuff that can actually ride the wave, you kind of have to take a punt of building it and waiting for the economy to come right. Much more speculative than residential investing. But, whoever rents those buildings or buys those buildings typically get a good deal if they go early enough. And, I'm seeing the stuff getting leased. But, the city still has a lot of empty space because we don't have the 20,000 people forecast to be in the city here yet. And we haven't got that because we haven't got enough housing. So housing drives population movement, which drives more demand for commercial and retail space. So it typically follows residential. What else we got here? Oh, no. That was a thank you. A good question, Kate. Oh, thank you. We've got someone saying that we've got a developer to talk to in Hamilton. Yeah, we'll have you on to those guys. Thank you very much. No questions for you, David. You just did such a good job.
No problem. Lots of great questions tonight, so that's excellent.
All right. We've got a couple more minutes or one more minute. And yeah, hopefully people enjoyed it, and hopefully we can help you get into property or advance your property, or make the right selection so that you buy the right property. Someone's asked me what I think of rebates. I don't know what the context is. Sorry. I like getting rebates, but it depends what it is. We typically ask our vendor developers for some sort of incentive, whether it's a discount. With the Fletcher's product, we've negotiated. In fact, I forgot to mention it before, but we've negotiated 2 months worth of rental relief in the event that it is vacant, which we don't think it will be. So there's an underwrite on the rent when you basically get in there first. But the property managers are telling us that they believe that they'll rent really quickly, because this complex has not had anyone put tenants in there yet. Someone's asked, so if you buy for $590 and they give you a discount or settlement pay for $20K cash, yeah, that's a rebate, and we negotiate those. So we've got that on Latimer with a discounted valuation. We've got that with Karamu with a discounted valuation. So yes, we do get rebates on behalf of our clients, and that's something we always try and do. You don't always get it, but it is I guess a common thing.
And you just got to verify that if you're paying $590, it's worth $590. You're not paying $590 for a $570,000 property. And we get independent valuations on our projects to make sure that they stack up. So just be careful that there's not a rebate back on an overpriced project, because you'll just have valuation headaches when it comes to settlement, if that's the case.
Yeah. Good point.
All right.
Well,
thanks everybody for
thanks
for spending 2 hours on our 1 hour webinar. Good we can deliver you 100% more value than we promised. Thanks for staying back.
No worries. All right. See you, everyone. Have a good evening, and we'll hopefully see you at the opening of your first rental or your fifth.